What's up guys, this is Jeff from Sorta Healthy, and today I'm coming to you with a different type of video. Today we'll be going over what you should do in order to pass your NASM Certified Personal Trainer exam. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. Most of my content is geared around making trainers better at what they do. And if you want to become a personal trainer, you really should obtain a certification from a top certifying agency such as NASM. They will teach you the foundational knowledge that is necessary for success in the field. That being said, studying NASM's materials on their own typically isn't good enough to get you a job. You have to actually pass the exam to get a personal training job. Luckily, this is where I come in. I can help you. Not just me though. A lot of the information presented in today's video comes from the subreddit Our Personal Training. So if you're considering a career in personal training, make sure to check it out over there. You know, we do some cool stuff like post memes and answer important questions, stuff like that. By the way guys, I also created a print-off guide for passing your NASM exam. That's free to download at this link in the video description. This guide is meant to key in on the areas that NASM is most likely to test you on. So if you complete it, your odds of passing your exam will definitely increase. And we'll be referencing this guide a lot in today's video. All I ask for in return for my tips and my guide is you liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. This helps to support the channel, which is a free resource to all fitness professionals. Thank you very much for the support, everyone. Now let's get into the rest of the video. So first things first, the NASM exam is no joke. I've been doing this for a long time. I have a degree in exercise science, and I was still stumped by a few questions on that exam. I studied too. I didn't bank on me having past experience in the field to get me to pass the exam. I put in about a month of studying where I studied for an hour or two almost every single day. I'm telling you all of this because I want you to understand that if you don't have a background in exercise science, or if you don't properly study for this exam, well, if you don't have either of those things, don't take the test. Another thing that I want to make clear right off the bat was that NASM actually did do a pretty good job of including questions from every single chapter in the final exam. Yes, that's right. The textbook does contain 21 chapters, and information from all of those 21 chapters is likely to appear on the final test. That being said, though, the material in some chapters is featured a lot more prominently on that big exam. So a big part of what we'll be doing today is figuring out what chapters you need to read, look over, and do a little bit more studying on, versus what chapters you really have to focus on knowing the content much more thoroughly. So now we're taking a look at a print-off guide that gives step-by-step instructions on what we over here at Sorta Healthy think you should do in order to pass your NASM exam. And the first thing that you should really do is read through all of the chapters while taking some light notes. You do not, I repeat, you do not have to memorize all of the material. However, if you really want to understand this stuff, be a halfway decent trainer, and ultimately pass your exam, read the damn chapters. Most of them are pretty short, to be honest. After reading a chapter, watch the chapter video right after reading that chapter. The videos are pretty good, and they definitely help to drive some of the understanding home for some of the more complicated concepts in the chapters. Right after reading the chapter and watching the chapter video, the best thing you can do after those two things is take your chapter quiz at least once. Don't go too crazy with this right now. We'll get more to that quiz thing soon. Okay, so now we're moving on to part 2, dialing in, or basically what myself and some other trainers have deemed to be some of the things that NASM is most likely to put on the final exam. And today we're going to break this down chapter by chapter. And even better than that, I'm not only going to break down what I think they're going to put on the final exam, a lot of times I'm going to actually explain the concepts that they're explaining in the textbook. So you might want to have like a pencil and paper ready just to take some notes. That's up to you. So in chapter 1, we need to know the physiological, physical, and performance benefits for each phase of the OPT model. We need to know as much about each phase as possible. Guys, NASM really does love their OPT model. There's definitely going to be a good number of questions about the OPT model on your final test. The main thing that they do in this first chapter is explain why you should use the OPT model. They also explain roughly what each phase does. So really, you need to know the end part of this chapter. Start to learn the different OPT model phases and what the purpose of each one of those phases is. Learn this as well as you can now because this is definitely going to come up a lot more later on. Okay, on to chapter 2, and chapter 2 is all about exercise science. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys, you're not going to memorize all this stuff. This chapter is pretty beefy. This is a prime example of a chapter that you read over carefully, understand as much as you can, and then use the quizzes and videos to help you out from there. Let's key in on a few areas that they're definitely going to ask you questions about though. And definitely something they're going to ask you some questions about are muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs. So muscle spindles are located within the muscle fibers themselves. They sense muscle stretch, cause muscle activation, and they're associated with reciprocal inhibition, which reciprocal inhibition is relaxation of muscles on one side of a joint to help contraction on the other side. Basically, if I'm contracting my biceps here, reciprocal inhibition causes my triceps to relax a little bit more, which helps my biceps to contract. And then you have Golgi tendon organs. And Golgi tendon organs are located within the collagen fibers on tendons or in musculotendinous junctions. A muscle can be inhibited by a Golgi tendon organ by autogenic inhibition. And autogenic inhibition is essentially when muscles are prevented from exerting more force than bones and tendons can tolerate. Make sure you guys know these things fairly well. You will have a handful of questions about these things on the final exam. You need to have a very basic understanding of the sliding filament theory. The sliding filament theory is how muscles contract. It's kind of complicated, and don't bother memorizing all of it. Just have a general understanding, or better yet, NASM does actually break it down in 2 steps. In step 1, a sarcomere, which a sarcomere is a functional unit of a muscle, by the way. A sarcomere shortens as a result of Z lines moving together. Z lines converge, and myosin heads attach to actin filaments, pulling the actin filament across the myosin, which shortens the fiber. I know, sounds like a bunch of scientific mumbo jumbo, but I would at least know it a little bit. It's on page 43 in your textbook. 100% know agonists, antagonists, synergists, and stabilizers. An agonist is a prime mover. If I'm doing a bench press, pec major is my agonist. In that same bench press, my triceps would be a synergist because they're helping out the movement, but they're not the prime mover. Again, a synergist basically just helps out the prime mover, but it's not doing the majority of the work. Then you have stabilizing muscles, and they're just there to keep you stable throughout the exercise. In that chest press example, your rotator cuff serves this purpose. An antagonist is a muscle that opposes your agonist or your prime mover. If I'm doing a bicep curl, the bicep would be my agonist because it's primarily doing the movement, and the antagonist would be my tricep because it's directly opposing the movement. They also have some nervous system stuff featured in this chapter. It's good stuff to review, and I did see a little bit of it on the final exam, but obviously there's nowhere near enough time in this video for me to break all of it down. And even if we did have enough time, NASM does a good job breaking it down in the text and in the videos, so of course just go review the nervous system stuff on there. And now we're moving on to chapter 3. Know the basic anatomy of the heart. You have 2 atria on the top and 2 ventricles on the bottom, and you're likely to have a question on the flow of blood through the heart. Luckily, you don't have to know everything in detail. So we kick things off with blood being utilized in the entire body. After that, the blood is pumped to the right atrium. Then this blood, which is still lacking oxygen, is pumped to the right ventricle, and then moves from the right ventricle to the lungs. In the lungs, that blood does get oxygenated, and the blood goes to your left atrium. Then it goes to your left ventricle, and then from the left ventricle, that blood is pumped to the rest of the body. And you also need to know how to monitor heart rate, and basically what you need to do is place your index and middle finger around the palm side of the wrist here, kind of just beneath the thumb, and then hold that for 60 seconds. Make sure you're only applying light pressure when you're doing this. Of course, in that 60 seconds, you would count their number of heartbeats, and that is their heart rate. If your client is exercising and you have to get their heart rate while they're exercising, NASM has a different way of obtaining heart rates for those people, but obviously we don't have time to break every single thing down, so that one is in your textbook. Okay, so we also have to know the support mechanisms of blood. The first support mechanism of blood is transportation of nutrients and oxygen. Another support mechanism of blood is regulation of acid balance and body temperature. So those first 2 are transportation and regulation. And the third support mechanism of blood is protection, and it mainly does that with immune response. Blood can also clot, which does prevent you from bleeding out if you get cut. Keep in mind, guys, that for everything we've discussed so far, we're not going into extreme detail. You will definitely need to still go review the chapters and the videos associated with those chapters. Alrighty, moving on to chapter 4, and chapter 4 is pretty much all about energy systems. And of course, the main thing to understand about energy systems is how long they last and when they activate. So ATP is the energy that our body needs for mechanical work such as exercise. And you have 3 main systems in your body that can create ATP. You have the ATP-PC system, or the phosphocreatine system, And that system is going to be most active when you first start out exercising intensely. This is the fastest and simplest energy system that you have in your body. Basically, your body can only supply energy to itself by using this system for about 10 to 15 seconds. This system is anaerobic, meaning it does not require oxygen. Next up, you have glycolysis, and this system is limited to about 30 to 50 seconds. I'm putting a disclaimer in here because glycolysis can actually last 1 to 3 minutes. NASM's explanation of glycolysis is not as good as it could be, and I don't want to confuse you in telling you why. For the sake of simplicity, and because it's the most likely thing to be on the test, know that glycolysis is the primary fuel source for relatively intense exercise lasting about 30 to 50 seconds. If you're doing a normal tempo 8 to 12 rep exercise, you're probably primarily using this system because that exercise is most likely to fall within this time range. Glycolysis can be anaerobic or aerobic, meaning it can function without oxygen, but oxygen can also be utilized. And this process is called glycolysis because it involves the breakdown of glucose. So aerobic glycolysis would be an oxidative system or an aerobic system because it requires oxygen. Again, glycolysis can be anaerobic or aerobic. The Krebs cycle and electronic transport chain also require oxygen and use products created from the other systems to help create energy. These systems can go on for much greater periods of time if you're working slow and steady. So in recap, the most important things for you to know here are: the first system that kicks into action is the ATP-PC system, or the phosphocreatine system, and that system's only going to last for about 10 to 15 seconds. The next system to get up and running is glycolysis, and that system can only primarily fuel the body for about 30 to 50 seconds. After that, you have your slower burning fuel sources kick in and engage, and those include things like the Krebs cycle and the electronic transport chain. These systems can provide your body with energy for a far longer period of time, and these later systems tend to utilize stored carbs and fats in the body. Alright, moving on to chapter 5, no joint movements like flexion, extension, etc. Just to give you guys an example, this is elbow flexion because the joint action is happening at my elbow joint, and the angle here, right here, is getting smaller. So as I am bringing my hand towards my face, the elbow joint here, the angle at that joint is getting smaller. Elbow extension would be the exact opposite thing. So it would be me bringing my hand away from my face like this, and as you can see now, this joint here is getting bigger. So this is elbow extension because at my elbow joint, the angle is going from here to here, therefore the angle is getting bigger. Of course, there are other joint actions that you have to know as well. For example, this is supination and this is pronation, but you're gonna have to look those up in the book and in the video because it does a pretty good job of breaking them down, and of course we don't have time to do that in today's video. But yes, having a good understanding of those basic joint actions is really pretty important. And you also need to know the anatomic positions such as superior, anterior, etc. So superior would be like my head is superior to my shoulder because it's higher up. Anterior would be like the front side of my body. And the opposite of anterior would be posterior, so the entire back side of my body here. And the list goes on here as well, guys. You're certainly likely to have questions on these joint movements and some of these anatomic positions as well. And you also need to know the muscle action spectrum, which basically just includes different types of contractions. When I'm doing a bench press and I'm lowering that bar down to my chest, basically this is an eccentric contraction because as I'm lowering that bar down to my chest muscles, my pec muscles, are lengthening. And if I want to pause at the bottom of that bench press for a second, that second that I'm pausing at the bottom for, that contraction is an isometric contraction because I'm holding it down there. So an isometric contraction doesn't involve any stretching or lengthening or shortening of the muscle. We're just kind of holding at that bottom position. And then when I push that barbell right back up, that's a concentric contraction because my muscles are shortening as I'm pushing that barbell back up. And that's, again, just called a concentric contraction. So prime mover is shortening, concentric contraction. Prime mover is lengthening, eccentric contraction. And prime mover is not lengthening or shortening. Isometric contraction usually would be at like the bottom of a lift. Okay guys, we're on to chapter 6, and yeah, there's just a lot to know in this one. So that's why I have general study written down here as well. So pronation distortion syndrome is knock knees, and it basically looks like this. When you're stuck in this position, these muscles are stuck in a shortened position, and these muscles are stuck in a lengthened position. You're absolutely going to have pronation distortion syndrome questions on your final test. You also need to know the overactive and underactive muscle groups for other things mentioned in this chapter, such as lower cross syndrome. You need to at the very least have a pretty good idea of the assessments in this chapter, and you should also know who these assessments are for client-wise. For example, the Davies test measures upper extremity agility and stabilization. It's an assessment where you have two pieces of tape 36 inches apart, and you have to have the client shimmy their hands over to each piece of tape alternating. In my opinion, it's a little bit of a silly assessment, but clearly this is for more advanced and athletic individuals. You'll probably never use things like this working as a trainer, but NASM does want you to know about them, and they're likely to appear on the final test. Okay, now we're moving on to chapter 7, and apparently this thing got cut off a little bit, but don't worry guys, I will fix that before you guys download it. So know and understand in depth the flexibility continuum. There are essentially three main pieces of the continuum. You have corrective flexibility, you have active flexibility, and you have functional flexibility. All three of these zones include SMR, but they include different stretches. You should know which stretches go into each part of the continuum. And we already talked about muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs and all that good stuff, but it does come up in this chapter as well, so make sure you review it here too, because again, this kind of stuff is absolutely going to come up on the final test. Obviously, every chapter should include some general review. Like I said, they do pull questions from pretty much every single chapter in the text. This chapter, however, is not one of the more featured ones though. Specifically review things like the cardio zones, RPE, the Borg scale. Those kind of things are likely to come up somewhere on your test, but it's not like they're that complicated and they're not going to be featured that much on your test, so just have a general understanding of all those different things. And it's also good to know the general aerobic activity recommendations for people. People are supposed to get 150 minutes of moderate cardio 5 days a week, or vigorous intensity cardio at least 3 days a week for 75 minutes. That's definitely worth knowing, as I've heard people have had that question on their exam. Okay, moving on to chapter 9, and this chapter is all about the core. And most likely the most important thing here is that you're going to need to be able to distinguish different core exercises and which phases those core exercises go into. You have core stability exercises like marching or a bridge, or a plank, which NASM loves to call prone iso abs. Weird, but okay. Anyway, these exercises involve little to no movement through the pelvis and spine. Then you have strength core exercises like crunches on a ball, cable rotations. The strength core exercises are some of the more basic core moves that you could have. And then you have power core exercises, and most of these involve rotational power. In the NASM textbook, basically anytime you see a medicine ball, yeah, that's going to be a power core exercise. Chapter 10 is all about balance, and you definitely have to know the balance and stabilization continuum. Basically, you start people here and progress them gradually to here. So this is harder than this, and this is harder than this. You should also memorize this one right here. Things get harder as you progress them. You should also know what exercises belong in each phase. Just like the last chapter, you have stabilization, strength, and power balance exercises. You should know that a single leg throw and catch is a balanced stabilization exercise, and that a single leg squat is a balanced strength exercise, and so on and so forth. So yes, like I said, know which balance exercises go in their respective phases. And I think that's where we're going to leave this video today, guys. We're about halfway through this NASM study guide, and I think that's a perfect place to stop, because if I try and do all of this in one video, it's just going to be super overwhelming and really not that helpful to anybody. So in a video coming out in the next week or two, I will cover the rest of the chapters as well. And again, we're focusing on things that you should definitely know for your NASM exam. In next week's video, we're also going to look at some bonus studying options. I'm going to talk about the Pocket Prep application, just some general flashcard stuff, and some extra review of the OPT model. So yeah, we do have some really useful stuff coming up in that video, so make sure if you haven't already that you like and subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss it. Anyways guys, I hope you found today's video helpful. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, stay sorta healthy.